everyone, and welcome to another session of our Ed Talk series. I want to give a very warm welcome to the educational community at King's College in Panama. Thank you for being with us today, as well as our colleagues over at High Performance Learning in UK. I am Andrea Ferrari, founder and CEO at Host Schools International. And together with my partner, hi Gabi, Gabriela Gonzalez Pacheco, Director of Programs, we have created this innovative space to inspire conversations around education during these changing times. Yes, education is transforming, and at Host Schools, we believe that well-being, happiness, equity, and innovation are the keys to a change that is sustainable and future-proof, and that can face the challenges of the short and the long-term consequences. So we gather in this space with educational experts and leaders that can inform our educational communities through their international perspectives, can inform our schools, our parents, our head teachers, our teachers and students. And together it is our hope to co-create the new landscape in education. Today we are super happy and honored to have with us Professor Deborah Eyre, who is the founder and chair at High Performance Learning. She's going to give us an introduction to what is high performance learning in education, what are its benefits, and why it's so important in this moment. And then right after Debbie, we're going to invite Nigel to talk to us about their experience over at King's College Panama. So welcome, Nigel. So happy to have you on board. And we'll begin with Debbie, yes? Vamos a empezar con Professor Deborah, please, for the production team. Over to Debbie in UK, over to Deborah. Professor Deborah Eyre, welcome to High Performance Learning on Host Schools.
I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you today about high performance learning. High performance learning is a way of reimagining education because we passionately believe that every single child can have academic success and a life full of opportunity and fulfillment. That's what we want for them. We believe this because learning science tells us that what we thought before was impossible is actually possible. So whereas most of us learned that the old bell curve, whereby some students were going to do well, most students were going to do okay, and perhaps some students not so well, what we now know from neuroscience, from psychology, from cognitive science, from education research, is that pretty much all of us have it within ourselves to do well. So in high performance learning, we want the school to create a culture where we actually expect that. And we know from the evidence that we've looked at that even with the very best schools in the world, when we start working with a school, only about 57% of teachers really believe that everyone that they teach could do well. So there's a job of work to do to change the culture so that everyone can. But I guess it's not much point just telling people they can, although that really changes their self-esteem and their positivity, their well-being, their happiness. But you have to make it happen for them. And learning science has told us exactly how to do that. So what we do in high performance learning is based on 40 years of research from researchers all over the world, including my own research. And what we've done is to look at the things that really make the difference when it comes to academic and cognitive success. And what we do with a school is to say, we introduce those ideas to teachers, to students, to their parents. And what we say is, these are the things that make the big difference, and you need to work to master them. It's not a secret. We now know this learning is a science. We know how to do it. So does this work in every school? Yes, any school. It looks different in different types of schools, but it can work anywhere. And the benefits of it are that students feel much more positive about what's possible for them. And that makes them feel happier and more willing to engage, more willing to take risks, to have a go at something. And they're not so concerned if it doesn't work out, because they know it's just not yet, rather than I'm just no good and I can't do it. So students really benefit from this. Of course, their parents, they can help out too. Once you tell parents about the things that really matter, of course they want to help their child. Every parent does. So it's about demystifying some of this. It's not complete rocket science. It's just that we now know some things for certain, and what we need to do is make good use of them. And of course, teachers, it makes teaching as a profession more enjoyable. If instead of, kind of thinking that only some people are going to be able to do exactly what I wanted, and, I'm going to have to just simplify it for others, what we're saying is, no, teach to the top, but putting the scaffolding that helps everybody to get to that position. So, I suppose the final thing is to say, well, why are we talking about this now? Why are we wanting to reimagine education right now? And I guess the short answer to that is because we can. So that's the first reason, is because we now know it's possible. And pretty much everybody who goes into education does so in order to help to create great life chances for their students. And now that we know that you could do so much more than we believed in the past, surely in education, that's what we should be doing. And when we study, and everyone is celebrating that kind of idea that everyone really can. So I guess what I want to say to you is, as we come out of the kind of COVID period, it's easy to talk ourselves into a kind of sense of depression. But what we really want to do is take the opportunity, seize it now. As our students returning to school, we want to create for them the kind of education that no previous generation has ever had. And goodness, don't they deserve it? They've had to go through a really difficult time. We are there to really present them now with an opportunity that they would never have had before. So I'm really pleased that Nigel Fossey and his school have adopted high performance learning, and they're going to tell you more about it. And I very much hope that more schools will join in this campaign to have a better kind of education for all our children in the future.
Amazing.
That certainly was amazing. We are so straight from Deborah Eyre. Thank you so very much. And for also introducing us to Nigel Fossey. Nigel, a teacher at King's College, Panama, and Inspired School, is also America's educational director for Inspired Education. We are, again, very honored to have you and your team along with us today to tell us a little bit more about how we create that school culture where everyone believes that all can do well, and how does a school decide to become a high-performance learning school? Welcome again, Nigel.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, it's a pleasure to see you, and I'm very honoured to follow Deborah in her very passionate call for a new paradigm in education, because that's what it is. It's not enough just to go back to the way things were before COVID. I think we have a golden opportunity here to make a start with great positivity and optimism for our children. I think a lot of the dialogue in the past few months and even years in this part of the world has been, catch up. How are we going to catch up from all the things we've lost? Well, I think actually the agenda should be, how can we actually exceed that and go beyond what we've experienced and actually come out of this better than what we were before. We've learned so much as a profession. Teachers have learned. I think this is an example of high performance learning in the way that teachers have changed in one day, from one day to another. They've changed from teaching at the school to going online, then to going to hybrid, and they've adapted. And our children have adapted too. And they've done that it's not been an easy process. It's been very painful, of course, for many of our children, but they've shown that adaptability. And if you'd asked me 2 years ago or 3 years ago what we've been through and how we've come out as a profession, I know it's a cliche, we've all said this, but it's hard to have expected what we've actually succeeded in doing and keeping our schools going through the pandemic. So I think the sky is the limit. It is the time for a new paradigm. And it is, I mean, for us in King's College, Panama, we were very fortunate. We're a fee-paying school. We're in a relatively well-off part of the world in Panama City. Our children come from very supportive families. We get very good academic results. We're quite a new school. But we didn't want to leave that to chance. And as we approach our 10th anniversary as a school, again, we're very young. We felt that there was a need to make sure that we go beyond getting a good inspection or a great accreditation. How can we guarantee that all the children that come to us get the best possible education? How can we guarantee to families, because that's what they're expecting. And it shouldn't just be families in private or fee-paying schools, it's families in all schools. How can we systematically provide an outstanding education for every child? And we all know, I mean, I was reading about Patrick Stewart, the actor, this week. He wrote a wonderful piece in The Guardian about a teacher that transformed his life. And through one small chance meeting, steered him on the road to being an actor. And he's obviously a world-class actor. Teachers do these things all the time, just by the very power of what they say. To children in those moments at the end of a lesson or in recess or in the lunch break, they have that potential to transform children. If we could isolate what it is that makes children blossom and thrive, and we know what it is because it's good deliberate teaching, then I think why wouldn't we do it? Why couldn't we actually trust that what teachers do is actually very transformational?
Well, Nigel, I think, I mean, I fell in love with what Deborah was saying because it's so true. But I think the main concern is we've kind of known that that teachers have this power. We kind of know that. And however, that doesn't necessarily mean that we know how to create a culture when this happens intentionally and systematically in a way that every single student gets that wonderful opportunity of seeing themselves reflected on their teacher's eyes as someone with potential and capability. So how do you do this? I mean, you've been implementing it at King's College. How could you share with us a little bit of how that translates?
Well, I think, and it's something that you have to put a lot of thought into. It's not just enough to give teachers training on growth mindset or to give them extra provision in terms of gifted and talented programs. And I think that's the mistake that many schools have made. And you definitely don't rely on the traditional ideas, as Deborah Eyre said, about the bell curve, that you expect or even should tolerate. 5% of your children doing excellently, going to Ivy League or going to Oxbridge or going to the Sorbonne, 5% failing, not going to college, and the middle sort of going to a fairly good school. It's not good enough. And I think it's that mindset shift in teachers that they have the confidence in the job that they're doing to know that their actions can make that difference. And what we have to do in becoming a high performance learning school, it's not just getting a badge, it's actually looking at our culture, really beginning with that fundamental culture of us as a school, going back to our development plan, going back to our vision. And we're actually quite lucky because we've got a chance to reinvent here. And I think COVID has been our friend in some ways, our ally, in that there's been this natural break before we go back. And I think for those of us in Panama that have come back, and I know our schools in Peru that actually have just come back last week, there is that sense of euphoria of actually, we're actually back, we're amongst the children, we are there with them, and starting to do the job that we love with children in school. Now is the time to actually change that culture. But it's being systematic, and it's obviously not a top-down approach. I've got two of my colleagues here, Joe, who's my head of elementary, or my head of primary school, and I've got Matt, who's my high school principal, head of secondary. They've been on the journey with me, and I think it's great that I've got people that truly fundamentally believe that you can give every child that opportunity. So as a guiding coalition, as a leadership team, we are converted and we are actually motivated and truly believe it. And I think that integrity of believing in every child through our own personal experience, through the experience of teaching, is something that gives us drive. And we obviously need to find allies in the school and systematically spread the word within our staff community, within our faculties.
I thank you, Nigel, for that. I was listening carefully and also trying to tie it into something that Deborah was saying earlier about taking those things that really matter. So I'm thinking about that. So what would those things be? The ones that really matter that we're going to take and make them a part of that everyday routine, and that it's embedded in everything that we do. Of course, you talked about the mindset and shifting that culture and that way of thinking, but is there something beyond that, something concrete that you could give to us in the audience today? I'm talking about these sets of competencies that are continually built on. I'm talking about those values, those attitudes, those attributes. What are those fundamentals that really matter to you at King's College that makes it all come together?
Well, I think that the foundations are the values and the attributes that are very, to any IB school. If you think about the IB learner profile or our own King's Group values, they form the basis of what we do and actually the expectations we have of children. But high performance learning goes a little bit deeper and aims to break down what the competencies are and what the attributes are and exemplify them. And the expectation is that teachers plan deliberately to include those in their lessons. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. And I think the biggest hurdle when you're starting this process is getting the teachers to realize that many of these things they're doing already. When they have, or when they give an outstanding lesson, when they give a class that's gone really well and they can see that the child is fired up, whether it's making progress in spelling or whether it's doing quadratic equations at 16, it's actually that deliberate practice of saying, okay, and identifying it and flagging up and calling it out and saying, that's a wonderful example of linking or making connections. That's a great example of metacognition. And then talking to the child in their own language, depending on the child's age, about what that process is. And I think it's almost like the drip effect of the tap. It does go in gradually. That if you surround the child with that language, if you have word walls showing those key terms, if you flag them up in the introduction to the lesson, the learning objective, it actually is a way of very powerfully getting the children to reflect on their own learning. But it's also not limited to the classroom. We were having a meeting with our parents and talking about the outline for high performance learning with them, because it's very important, as you know, to get the parents to buy into it. And it's not just about what happens in the classroom. It should be about every behavior around the school. How you eat in the dining hall, in the refectory. How you move into the school from recess or playtime. How the children move around the school and wait for their lesson to begin. It's all of those things, and it's not necessarily being the most formal or British. This is something that works in schools of a wide variety of cultures. I mean, high performance learning is very popular in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, very, very different cultures from the UK, and a variety of international schools. But it's actually those behaviors that successful people have, and teaching those behaviors.
Lovely. I believe that you're reminding us that a lot of this has to do with reshaping our image of ourselves, of our students. And when we think about our view of ourselves, and that is based on what others tell us and our experience, I suppose what you're saying too is that we're creating those experiences deliberately, as you mentioned already, in order for these things to start falling into place routinely, and that must have a profound effect on how children reshape their identity, their sense of self-worth, their self-esteem, which, as we know now, has come to take a center stage in terms of the whole social and emotional component that makes learning possible. When I feel good, I learn better, and there is no learning without well-being. So we at Host Schools firmly believe in what high performance learning is doing for our school communities, and we're so thankful that you can be here to share this with us. I believe we had another question around the role of teachers, the role of parents that you've touched a little bit upon. Would you care to?
Andrea, also, I think one of the things that Deborah said, which I think is amazing, is why do it now? And she answered, because we can. No, and this idea, which I think is true, that many schools are slipping into this sense of, post-COVID, or transition COVID, sense of depression, of just feeling overwhelmed by the obstacles and everything that is happening. So I think it's really important when we're talking about the role of parents and teachers and just implementing this through a crisis as we have gone through. What would be the most essential thing to just keep in mind, Nigel?
I think communication. It's the way we got through the COVID crisis, when we were putting in biosecurity protocols, and then now we're hopefully gradually removing them or changing them. It's effective communication. It's allowing parents to see where the school is going, and I think sometimes you need to spell it out. What we do is we make sure the parents see the development plan, and we keep our development plan as simple as possible. Traditionally, British school strategic plans could be up to 40, 50 pages. We keep ours to 6 pages, and we make sure that what the school is doing in a particular academic year is something that the parents have a say in, the teachers have a say in, and also I think what our parents like is the fact that it leads us to give each child individual attention. And the fact that we have those aspirations of every child, and parents know their children perfectly well. I mean, many of us are parents. We know the strengths and weaknesses of our child, or the areas that our child could do with extra support or scaffolding in. And for the school to know the children well and to be able to identify those areas and put interventions in place is not labeling that child as a middle ability child or a low ability child or a gifted and talented. It's saying you have particular areas that you need to work on, you have areas that you're outstanding in, and that I think that motivates children as well. I'm not seeing the depression in the schools that I visit and in our own school. What I'm seeing people are tired. I'm seeing teachers need to have something that they need to re-energize. But I think for me, it's having that clear vision of where the school is going and where education is going, and a more optimistic message in terms of the potential of children.
I love all this optimism, this positivity, and I'm so glad that we have a big audience out there listening to us today. I know, Gabriela, you're filtering through some of the comments and questions that are coming in. Please do interrupt at any time. And I just want to go back and really emphasize on this concept of demystifying some of these things around the fixed mindset of labeling children, which is something you mentioned just now. I love the analogy that Deborah used, that, she spoke about the brain being exquisitely plastic and it can be molded, and the role of an educator being much like a brain surgeon that we can put at the forefront and handle these different expectations, make them be known, and work towards that, and everyone can. So I'm very excited about all the research behind this and how these new neural pathways can be developed by this routine practice. I think that thinking about this as a learning science is definitely something that helps us for this to be data-driven, to be research-based, and puts out there the idea that we are forever evolving and changing, and in education, it's certainly something that innovation speaks highly to, no? That we are discovering new ways to make those connections.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
I think also, as any of the people out there will know, enthusiastic, passionate teachers make for wonderful learning opportunities. And what we're doing is we're creating a language and a culture where teachers feel re-professionalized. And they're talking about learning in a way that's deeper than how they were talking about it before. And that for me is wonderful, because that truly is a high-performing school. You know, we could sell it to our families and our children. We're going to get them better results, and of course that will happen. That's an inevitable consequence of that passionate educational atmosphere of deliberate practice. But it's actually the motivation of teachers, and teachers need that sense that they can make a difference. And what they're doing with any child in their class or in their grade level is making a difference. And it's the joy of being a teacher, and that's why I've been in education for nearly 30 years. I absolutely love that feeling of making a difference to the children.
That's a great point, Nigel. Thanks for reminding us about the joy of teaching, which is where once upon a time all of us began. Certainly, Gabriela and I had a long trajectory through teaching, myself in the arts. Gabriela is gifted in the social emotional realms, and that's what brings us together here today to continue to celebrate this and actually acknowledge those people that are the pillars that make everything happen every day. And I know they're out there, and I know they're listening. So I guess in the couple minutes that are left with you, and having the honor to hear from your experience, what kind of advice might you leave us with? Those maybe students in the audience that are listening, the teachers that are with us today, or parents, and of course other school leaders. What would be something that, if they're looking to become a high performance learning school, or just follow in this path, what should be our first steps?
Well, I think the first step is to be aware that a high-performing school is not a school in a privileged area. It's not necessarily a fee-paying school. It's not a school in the UK or in a privileged suburb of Boston or an expensive part of Paris. It is a school that can be anywhere in the world if it's got the right mindset and the right cultural approach to teaching and what it's doing, and having a vision for that. Deborah didn't mention in her presentation, but many of the schools that are HPL schools that have been through this program and have had this mindset change are in very deprived areas. So King's has the honor of being a high performance learning school, but it's by no means the only kind of school that follows this educational philosophy. And I think that's very important. So it's not restricted to certain kinds of schools. I think for me, if a school is going to embark on this journey, I think that the leadership team, the administrators need to have the mindset themselves that they can make a difference, and that teachers are trainable, teachers are moldable to actually, in terms of their practice. And obviously, it's not an easy thing changing the culture of a school changing the direction of a school or the culture of a school. It can be a bit like turning a super tanker, because it's such a complex structure, it's such a complex organization, but it is possible.
Well, that's certainly inspirational. And thank you for reminding us about that equity component. We certainly want everyone to know that this is something so universal that it can be adapted and implemented in any culture, in any country, in any school, at whatever end of the spectrum. And that in and of itself is so inspiring for all of us educators out there that are in this profession to make a difference and not leave the world the way we found it. So a big hug to all of you guys over at King's. So happy to have you from Panama, and a huge thank you to Nigel for connecting us with Deborah Eyre. Deborah, if you're out there listening, we are really honored to have this opportunity. And well, of course, to the audience, I keep getting comments. Here's one from Tom Wingate, thanking you from the Tom Wingate School in Mexico City for the invitation. And wow, he's really impressed. He says, as a team leader, Nigel, what energizes you? I think you've spoken a lot to that today. You have certainly high levels of energy. I've got Pablo Chiape from Gimnasio La Cumbre in Bogota. He says, what a wonderful talk, inspiring and powerful. And well, so many more, but I'm afraid we're running out of time. Any last comments from you, Nigel, from you, Gabby? Please go ahead.
Well, I would say thank you because, yes, I think after we talked with Deborah and with Nigel, I was just re-inspired. And I can say that we have been talking with many inspiring people about what we can do in education. And I think this is just, as you said, it's an opportunity. No, it's a seed of opportunity that comes from a very sad situation, but it gives us a chance to do more for our students because they deserve it. So thank you so much for that. And that's it for me.
Bueno, pues con esto les deseamos una linda noche, and thank all of you for reminding us that everyone can. And with that, a cheerful ending to our session today. Thanks again, Nigel. Un abrazote.
Thank you.